In a bustling city, where towering hospital buildings sparkled under the sun, a venerated institution stood proud, recognized both for its state-of-the-art facilities and its renowned staff. Yet within those immaculate walls, a battle raged silently, a battle for ethics and compassion amid an industry increasingly driven by profit margins. At the heart of this conflict was Dr. Emily Carter, a gifted surgeon whose life was dedicated to mending broken lives. One patient at a time, Emily was not just known for her surgical skills. Her empathy and unwavering commitment to her patients set her apart in an environment that often dismissed these qualities as weaknesses. Emily had always believed in the mission of healing, not just repairing physical ailments, but also offering hope and support to those in need. Her main goal was to ensure the best possible outcomes for her patients. However, as the years slipped by, she began to notice a troubling shift within the hospital's administration. The once noble intentions of care had slowly morphed into a preoccupation with financial gain. Policies were introduced that prioritized revenue generation over patient needs. Surgical procedures, once deemed essential, were now assessed through a lens of profitability, leading to an unsettling climate where unnecessary surgeries were pushed onto patients, and a culture of compliance reigned supreme. Each day, as Emily donned her scrubs and prepared for surgery, a seed of doubt crept into her mind. Was she part of a system that compromised patient safety for the sake of profit? The turning point came one fateful morning when she encountered Mia, a vibrant 12-year-old girl with dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Mia had been diagnosed with a life-threatening condition that required urgent treatment. However, the financial implications loomed large, and the hospital's new regulations meant that Mia's treatment was deemed too expensive for the facility to cover. Emily's heart sank as she listened to Mia's mother, who tearfully explained the family's dire situation. They were faced with a heart-wrenching choice: either go into crippling debt or accept a grim prognosis. It was at that moment that Emily realized she could no longer stand idly by while her patients suffered under the weight of corporate greed. The pressure mounted, as her superiors urged her to follow the protocols designed to bolster the hospital's bottom line. The ethical dilemma was clear: comply with demands that conflicted with her moral compass or risk her career to stand up for someone who deserved better. In the weeks that followed, Emily wrestled with her conscience. The whispers of doubt and fear were relentless, but in her heart, she knew that she had a choice to make. A choice that could not only change Mia's life, but also define her own legacy as a physician. As she gathered her thoughts, she knew she was not alone in her struggles. There were others like her, hiding behind their white coats, yearning for the courage to confront the injustices within a system they had once believed in. The journey ahead was treacherous, but deep within her, a spark of resolve ignited, setting the stage for a confrontation that would challenge the very foundations of the hospital and its dubious practices. Dr. Emily Carter was not just any surgeon. She was a beacon of hope in a world where compassion often took a back seat to profit. Renowned for her skillful hands and nurturing heart, she had made a name for herself at St. Augustine's Hospital, a prestigious facility known for its impressive patient care and cutting-edge medical technology. Emily had dedicated her life to medicine, not only because of her passion for healing, but also due to her strong belief in the sanctity of life and the ethical responsibility that came with wearing a white coat. From the moment she completed her residency, Emily distinguished herself by always placing her patients' needs above all else. Her colleagues often marveled at her ability to connect with patients. She listened intently, spoke with empathy, and was always willing to go the extra mile, whether that meant staying late to ensure a patient was comfortable or volunteering her time to provide free medical consultations in underserved communities. Her dedication was palpable, and she quickly became a trusted figure among not only her patients but also her peers. However, beneath the gleaming surface of St. Augustine's, there lay a darker reality. As the years went by, Emily began to notice changes within the hospital's administration. The once patient-centered ethos that drew her to St. Augustine's began to slowly morph into a profit-driven model. Corporate policies took precedence, and decisions were increasingly dictated by financial returns rather than the well-being of patients. Emily was troubled, but determined to maintain her integrity amidst the shifting tide. Despite the increasingly hostile environment, Emily continued to fight the good fight. She chose to advocate for the vulnerable, often taking on cases that others deemed unprofitable or too complicated. In her eyes, every patient represented an individual story, a life worth saving, not a mere statistic or a financial transaction. The more she witnessed the changes in hospital directives, the more resolute she became, swearing to uphold her oath as a physician, not merely a skilled surgeon. Emily also became a quiet activist within the hospital. She frequently engaged her colleagues in discussions about ethical practices in medicine, urging them to reflect on their roles as caregivers. However, many of her peers were reluctant to take a stand against the administrative pressure and financial constraints. They worried about job security and their reputations, questioning whether it was worth the risk to challenge the status quo. But for Emily, there was no choice. It was her duty not just to her patients, but also to her conscience. As Dr. Emily Carter moved through the hospital's halls, her heart weighed heavily with the decisions looming before her. She was not merely an observer to the inequities of the healthcare system. She was an inherent part of it, and she felt the intense pull of her ethical obligations as a physician. With each passing day, Emily wrestled with the tension between her commitment to patient care and the grim reality of a system increasingly prioritizing profits over lives. But she knew one thing for certain: she could never turn a blind eye. You see, for Emily, being a doctor was more than just a profession. It was about nurturing humanity at its most vulnerable. And in her mind, every life truly mattered. In the bustling heart of Mercy General Hospital, where the scent of antiseptic mingled with the hum of fluorescent lights, a concerning trend began to unfold. Dr. Emily Carter had dedicated her life to becoming a surgeon not just for the thrill of the scalpel, but for the profound impact she could make on her patients' lives. However, as the months passed, she began to sense an unsettling shift in the hospital's culture, one that focused more on profit margins than patient wellness. The administration's top brass, with their focus on financial balance sheets and quarterly profits, seemed to overlook the very foundation of their oath. First, do no harm. Week after week, she witnessed the fallout of decisions driven by financial gain. Budget constraints dictated treatment protocols, while the need to maximize revenue pushed her to perform procedures that left her filled with doubt. As a surgeon, Emily was trained to save lives. Yet now she found herself in a system that encouraged her to know the value of a dollar far better than the value of a human life. During one particularly busy afternoon, as Emily prepared for her next surgery, she overheard a conversation between two hospital executives just outside the operating room. They were discussing a strategic initiative that involved prioritizing elective surgeries, high-revenue procedures with lucrative insurance payouts. If we can increase the number of knee replacements this quarter, we'll hit our targets, one executive asserted, his tone indifferent as he glanced at the statistics on his tablet. Emily's heart sank. But what about the patients who genuinely need those procedures? She thought, feeling the weight of her mounting frustration. One evening, as she sat in her office after a long day, Emily received an urgent call from a distraught mother named Lisa, whose daughter, Mia, was only 9 years old and suffering from a rare kidney condition. Mia's symptoms had worsened, and her medical team had deemed her immediate access to a transplant both critical and affordable. Yet, the hospital's new policies meant that if the family couldn't pay the prohibitive costs up front, Mia's chances of receiving the surgery would diminish. Determined to help, Emily dived deep into Mia's case file. As she pored over notes and medical histories, she discovered grave injustices. The child had been placed on a waiting list, overshadowed by wealthier patients whose surgeries were expedited simply because they had better insurance coverage. Emily felt a torrent of anger as she realized that greed had infiltrated the very core of the institution she had devoted her life to serving. Balancing on the precipice of moral conflict, Emily found herself trapped between her loyalty to the hospital and her commitment to her patients. She knew that if she failed to act, countless lives like Mia's would continue to hang in the balance, sacrificed on the altar of corporate profit. With each passing day, her conscience nagged at her. How could she stand by and watch as the health system transformed into a money-making machine, neglecting the values of compassion and care? In choosing to adhere to her ethical standards, Emily understood she could no longer ignore the institutional corruption that lay beneath the surface. The conflict within her raged on, yet she was readying herself to confront it, fueled by the urgency of Mia's plight, as well as a growing determination to reclaim the moral integrity of her profession. One sunny afternoon, Dr. Emily Carter was going through her regular rounds in the hospital, her mind racing with thoughts of her patients and the increasing pressure to meet the absurd quotas set by the administration. She entered the pediatric ward, where the laughter of children often masked the harsh realities of illness. As she approached Mia's room, a young girl battling leukemia, Emily felt a familiar pang of indifference from the hospital's management regarding the young patient's needs. Mia's bright eyes were filled with hope as she held her teddy bear tightly. Despite her frail body and the painful treatments her little form had undergone, she radiated an innocence that made Emily determined to fight for her. But it wasn't just Mia who occupied her thoughts that day. Emily had lately been torn between her dedication to her profession and the increasing pressure from the hospital administration to produce higher revenues. The latest newsletter from the executives outlined their new strategy: perform more surgeries, prescribe more treatments. But behind the jargon and corporate speak, it was clear the hospital had turned its back on patient care, favoring profits over compassion. As she checked Mia's charts, Emily discreetly scanned the recent updates on her treatment. It was then she discovered something alarming. The cost-cutting measures had led to the denial of crucial medication for Mia, a vital drug necessary for her recovery. Emily marveled at the cruel irony of the situation. Here was a girl, so full of hope and potential, yet the powers that be were denying her the chance to survive due to financial constraints. It made her stomach churn. The truth hit Emily like a freight train. She remembered Mia's mother, who had pleaded with the administration for assistance, only to be turned away with a dismissive shrug. These were not just numbers or charts. They were lives, lives that deserved to be cherished, nurtured, and fought for. Emily realized that behind the sterile walls of the hospital, there existed a sinister trend of prioritizing costs, compromising the integrity of the healthcare system. Frustrated and angry, she sat down with her notepad and began to jot down her thoughts, her emotions pouring forth onto the page. She envisioned the faces of the countless children, like Mia, whose lives depended on her, and doctors like her to stand up against this corporate greed. She knew these weren't isolated incidents. This malaise was symptomatic of a much larger disease that afflicted the healthcare system. That moment in the pediatric ward became a catalyst for Emily. She could no longer stand by and witness this negligence. With determination burning in her heart, she knew a decision was required. Mia's fate was intertwined with a much larger narrative that demanded her voice. Emily resolved to take action, action that would expose the turmoil beneath the pristine facade of the hospital, and advocate for the lives that people like Mia unambiguously deserved. Driven by resilience, Emily fashioned a plan that would not only aid Mia but also ignite a movement towards ethical responsibility. The nurses' station buzzed with chatter as Emily connected with her colleagues, starting to plant the seeds of rebellion against the corrupt system that was jeopardizing life, hope, and their very purpose as caregivers. She found herself standing at the crossroads of morality and complicity, no longer satisfied with being just a bystander in her own profession. And with that realization, the storm inside Emily ignited. She was ready to undertake the journey of exposing the truth, not only for Mia but for all those who could not fight for themselves. As Dr. Emily Carter stood in the sterile glow of the hospital's surgical suite, her heart weighed heavy with the burden of conflict. The hum of the machines that monitored her patients' vital signs seemed to echo the dissonance brewing within her. Every day, she would walk past eager interns and bustling nurses, each immersed in their own world. Yet Emily felt isolated, standing on the edge of a moral abyss. The relentless pressure from the hospital administration to increase surgical revenue was mounting, and its implications were becoming all too real. In her 12 years as a surgeon, Emily had always prioritized her patients' well-being above all. Yet now, She was inundated with directives that churned her stomach, perform surgeries that weren't necessary, bypass ethical considerations, and, ultimately, serve the insatiable appetite of a profit-driven healthcare system. The thought of operating on patients who didn't need surgery felt like an act of betrayal, not just to her profession, but to the very humanity she pledged to uphold. But a defining moment arose when she met Mia, a bright-eyed 8-year-old grappling with a severe heart condition. The young girl's eyes glimmered with hope as Emily explained the potential treatments, surgeries that could save her life. However, as Emily reviewed Mia's insurance and the hospital's prognosis, the weight of administrative decisions bore down on her. Treatment was deemed too expensive, and the family was put on a waiting list, their hopes hanging by a thread. Mia's condition was deteriorating, and time was not on their side. As Emily witnessed the despair in Mia's mother's eyes, something inside her snapped. How could she stand idly by while corporate interests dictated the course of care for vulnerable patients? Days turned into sleepless nights as thoughts of Mia haunted her. Emily's conscience screamed in protest against the unethical protocols that her peers were blindly following. She was at a crossroads. She could conform, play the game, and ensure her own career flourished. Or she could defy the system, risk her job, and fight for what was right. The internal struggle only deepened when Emily reached out to her mentor, Dr. Patel, an experienced surgeon who had once inspired her to follow her passion for medicine. When she voiced her concerns, she discovered that he had faced similar demons throughout his career. "You have to ask yourself what kind of doctor you want to be, Emily," he said, a somber expression crossing his face. "When you look back on your life, it won't be the promotions or accolades that you remember. It will be the faces of those you saved or didn't." His words ignited a fierce determination in her soul. Emily realized that she bore a responsibility that extended far beyond the operating room. She was the voice for patients who couldn't speak for themselves. As she tore herself away from the weight of her hesitation, clarity emerged. If she sought to be the fine surgeon she always aspired to be, she would have to confront the very system she had once believed to support her mission. No matter the consequences, Emily knew she had made her choice. She would fight for Mia and others like her. Embracing her role as an advocate, she steeled herself against the challenges that lay ahead. The seed of resolve had been planted, and it was time to grow into something powerful and transformative. Dr. Emily Carter sat in the dimly lit break room of the hospital, the usual bustling atmosphere overshadowed by her mounting anxiety. She held a steaming cup of coffee in her trembling hands, the warmth failing to penetrate the chill of doubt that had settled over her. Across the table sat Dr. Patel, her mentor, a seasoned physician known for his wisdom and unyielding support of his younger colleagues. He sensed Emily's turmoil and leaned forward, his eyes filled with understanding. "Emily, you look troubled," he said gently, probing for the truth she was reluctant to share. "What's weighing on your mind?" With a deep breath, Emily laid bare her fears, the unethical pressure from hospital administration to prioritize profits over patient care, the unsettling realization that the system she had dedicated her life to was, in many ways, broken. She recounted the heartbreaking case of Mia, the young girl who needed a life-saving procedure but was denied because the hospital deemed her treatment too costly. As the words flowed, Emily felt the weight of her conscience pressing heavily against her resolve. Dr. Patel listened intently, his brow furrowing as he absorbed every word. "I faced similar choices early in my career," he admitted, his voice grave. "I was pressured to prescribe certain medications that I knew were not in my patient's best interests. In the end, I chose to speak out, but it came at a price. You have to consider your moral compass in times like this, Emily. But what good does speaking out do when the system is so entrenched in corruption?" she replied, frustration leaking into her voice. "I'm just one doctor against an entire administration that cares more about the bottom line than the well-being of patients." Dr. Patel's eyes sparkled with a hint of fierce determination. "One voice can start a revolution. Remember, it is not just about you. It's about every patient who suffers in silence when good doctors stay quiet. If we remain complicit, we're allowing that suffering to continue. You have the chance to make a difference, to be the change you wish to see." Emily felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, but self-doubt still lurked in the shadows. What if they retaliate? What if I lose my job? The fear of what lay ahead constrained her spirit, but Dr. Patel shook his head, as if to dispel her trepidation. Fear will always exist in the face of injustice, but do not allow it to paralyze you. Gather your evidence, speak with your colleagues, and let them know they are not alone. You are not just fighting for yourself or Mia. You are fighting for every single patient who has been overlooked in favor of profit. In that moment, a newfound fire lit Emily's resolve. With Dr. Patel's encouragement, the daunting task ahead seemed a little less insurmountable. Her mentor's experiences resonated deep within her, reinforcing the idea that no act of courage, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Emily realized that she had allies within the system. Her colleagues were not merely employees. They were healers bound by a common oath to do no harm. As Dr. Patel's words washed over her, Emily felt the chains of doubt begin to loosen. With a determined heart, she envisioned a future not just for Mia, but for countless others who had remained unheard. Courage would not be the absence of fear, but the will to act despite it. And in that break room, with a mentor by her side, Emily Carter took a significant step towards righting the wrongs of the healthcare system that had so deeply troubled her. With her heart pounding in her chest, Dr. Emily Carter sat in her dimly lit office, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptics and the faint sounds of bustling nurses outside. A patient file lay open before her, the words Mia Thompson echoing in her mind. This young girl, barely 10 years old, was caught in a web of bureaucracy that valued profit over her life. Emily could feel the weight of the world resting on her shoulders as she contemplated the unthinkable. Turning her back on her moral compass or standing up for a child whose dreams were slipping away with each passing second. Determination surged through her as she thought about the countless patients who had been adversely affected by the hospital's ruthless pursuit of profit. The administration's greed was contagious, spreading apathy and fear throughout the staff. But Emily couldn't allow herself to become part of a flawed system. The stories of patients in pain, both physical and emotional, haunted her every moment. She vowed that Mia wouldn't become another statistic. Yet her heart battled against the immense pressure exerted by her superiors. Colleagues had lost their jobs for less. The whispers of retaliation echoed ominously in her mind. In that moment of introspection, a flicker of hope ignited within her. Emily remembered her mentor, Dr. Raj Patel. His wise words had always resonated with her, especially when he'd shared tales of his own fights against the institutional corruption that plagued their profession. Emily picked up her phone and dialed his number, her pulse quickening as it rang. When he answered, she explained the gravity of the situation, her voice trembling with urgency. "Raj," she began, "it's not just about Mia. It's about all the patients who are suffering under the weight of greed. I need your guidance." Dr. Patel listened intently, his silence punctuating the gravity of her words. "Emily," he finally replied, "you have to be the change you want to see. I know it's scary, but sometimes we have to take a stand, even if it seems like we're going against the tide." His encouragement fortified Emily's resolve. With a steely determination, she made the decision to gather evidence of the hospital's malpractice. Emily meticulously documented every instance of patient neglect and unnecessary procedures, collecting testimonies from fellow healthcare workers who had witnessed the same unethical practices. They began to share whispered conversations in the break room, solidarity building as each member of the staff realized they were not alone in their outrage. With her colleagues behind her, Emily felt empowered. They shared stories of their experiences and the lives affected by the hospital's policies. From the nurses to the janitorial staff, everyone had witnessed the troubling shift toward prioritizing profits. Together, they drafted a letter detailing their concerns, signed by all those willing to stand against the corruption that had infiltrated their sacred duty as caregivers. The moment of truth loomed as Emily prepared to confront the administration. She knew her decisions would not only impact her career, but also the lives of the patients she vowed to protect. Adrenaline surged through her as she steeled herself for the confrontation. determined to expose the truth and ignite change in a system that had long forgotten its purpose. As she tucked the letter under her arm, Emily knew she was ready for the fight of her life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows in the hospital's conference room, Dr. Emily Carter stood at the front, her heart racing yet resolute. The entire administration team was gathered, their expressions a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Emily had spent countless hours compiling data and testimonials from patients, and now she was ready to unveil the truth about the hospital's unethical practices. She glanced at her mentor, Dr. Patel, who sat in the back, offering a reassuring nod. With that solitary gesture, she felt a surge of courage flood through her. "Thank you for gathering on such short notice," Emily began, her voice steady but laced with urgency. "I am here today to address a matter far more consequential than our routine operations. It deals with our integrity as healthcare providers." The room fell silent, the air thick with tension as department heads exchanged furtive glances. Emily took a deep breath and continued. "I have gathered evidence indicating that our hospital's focus has shifted from patient care to profit generation, compromising the very essence of our vocation." As she spoke, Emily pulled up slides on the projector, illustrating patient statistics, documentation of unnecessary surgeries, and testimonials from distraught family members like Mia's. "Here's Mia's story," she said, displaying a photograph of the young girl, her bright eyes filled with hope. "This child has been denied treatment strictly due to cost-cutting measures in our system. We are responsible for this. These figures represent lives lost, pain inflicted, and trust shattered." The uneasy murmurs that filled the room were interrupted by the sharp voice of the hospital's chief administrator, Mr. Thompson, a man more concerned with financial sheets than human lives. "Emily, while your passion is commendable, we must also consider the financial stability of this institution. We have a budget to maintain. Financial stability should never come at the expense of compassion," Emily retorted, her voice unwavering. "What is a hospital, if not a sanctuary for those in need? I'm appealing to your sense of ethics, to remind you of our primary directive, to heal and protect." The meeting grew tense as Emily's words sank in, the weight of her convictions pressing against the vested interests of the administration. "If we don't stand up for patients like Mia, we lose our purpose. I am calling upon each of you to join me in this fight for reform," she urged, locking eyes with her fellow colleagues, some of whom had remained silent but visibly shaken by her exposé. She could see the conflict in their eyes. Years of indoctrination versus a sudden urge to do right in the world they had become complicit in. Emily's heart raced as she reached the climax of her presentation. "I have gathered evidence not only of malpractice but also of potential fraud. We must act now, together, to expose these practices and push for accountability." As she concluded, the tension in the room felt palpable, a mixture of fear and hope intertwining. Emily stood firm, waiting for a response, not knowing if she had ignited a spark of rebellion or if she was simply shouting into the void. The moment hung heavy in the air. She had dared to challenge an impervious system, and now it was time for action. With the moral stakes raised high and the truth laid bare, the future of the hospital, and perhaps the lives of countless patients, was now on the edge of a knife. As the sun began to set on a tense afternoon, the boardroom of St. Michael's Hospital was filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the forefront, her heart racing as she prepared to present her case against the administration's unethical practices. The consequences of her actions weighed heavily on her mind, but the faces of her patients, especially that of young Mia, bolstered her resolve. Seated around the polished oak table were hospital executives, their expressions ranging from skepticism to anger. Emily's mentor, Dr. Patel, was with her, offering silent support. She took a deep breath, mentally reminding herself of the countless lives at stake. This meeting was not just about her career. It was about exposing a system that commodified human lives in the name of profit. "Thank you for allowing me to address this board today," Emily began, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I am here to discuss a matter that could redefine the morals of our institution." She could feel the weight of their gazes pressing on her, daring her to back down. But there was no turning back now. She pulled out a stack of documents, her evidence of malpractice, and systematically began to outline the hospital's recent financial pushes for unnecessary surgeries. The room fell silent as she presented a series of charts, statistical analyses, and testimonies from her colleagues, all supporting her claims. Carefully, she laid out her encounters with patients, one by one detailing how the administration's focus on profit directly impacted their care. Emily's heart pounded as she recounted Mia's story. Just yesterday, I had to tell a 9-year-old girl that she wouldn't receive the treatment she desperately needed due to cost-cutting policies, she stated firmly. Is this the legacy we want for St. Michael's? To push away those who require our help the most? The atmosphere shifted. Several board members exchanged uneasy glances, the uneasiness palpable in the air. Emily sensed that her words were resonating, that perhaps even some of them felt the weight of their decisions. Sensing an opening, she pressed on, bringing forth a resolution. I urge this board to rethink our policies, to prioritize compassionate care over financial gain. It is time we face the reality of our actions and their consequences. As she concluded her presentation, a murmur of voices filled the room. Dr. Patel chimed in, echoing her sentiments, emphasizing the need for a thorough investigation so that the hospital could realign itself with the values it was founded upon. Their unified stance began to sway some members of the board, who spoke up to express their concerns about the current trajectory. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, but at last, the room erupted in deliberation. As they debated the merits of Emily's claims, the tension that once filled the air began to transform into something almost hopeful. Voices of reason emerged, arguing for accountability and changes in patient care practices. Slowly, a collective understanding formed, the shared realization that their institution could be so much more than it had become. A vote was called, and as decisions were announced, a wave of relief washed over Emily. The board agreed to an independent investigation into the practices at St. Michael's Hospital, pledging to bring in a new framework emphasizing ethical patient care. With a renewed mission, they vowed to restore, uphold, and advocate for the very values that initially defined their profession. In this moment of victory, Emily felt lighter than she had in weeks. The arduous battle was just beginning, but the dawn of change was upon them. Her courageous decision had unveiled the dark practices hidden behind the hospital doors, instilling hope where it seemed lost. The path ahead would undoubtedly be challenging, but with integrity and compassion now guiding their efforts, they could begin rebuilding their hospital into a sanctuary for healing once more. In the aftermath of Dr. Emily Carter's courageous stand, the hospital was left with no choice but to confront the truth. Public outcry, fueled by the evidence she presented, led to an official investigation into the administration's unethical practices. News outlets picked up the story, and the pressure mounted until the hospital's board was forced to take action. Policies changed, new leadership was installed, and patient care was once again prioritized over financial gain. Emily, though battered by the emotional toll of her fight, found solace in knowing she had made a difference. Mia, the young patient whose case had ignited her crusade, finally received the treatment she so desperately needed. Watching Mia smile again, healthy and full of life, reaffirmed Emily's belief that doing the right thing, even when it comes at great personal cost, is always worth it. The changes in the hospital sparked a broader conversation in the medical community. Other doctors, inspired by Emily's bravery, began questioning their own institutions, demanding transparency, and advocating for ethical standards. The ripple effect of her decision extended far beyond the walls of a single hospital, proving that one person's courage can truly create meaningful change. This story serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of integrity, not just in healthcare but in every aspect of life. It challenges us to ask, when faced with a moral dilemma, would we have the strength to choose what's right over what's easy? Would we be willing to risk our comfort, our careers, and even our reputations to protect those who cannot protect themselves? Let this be a wake-up call to all of us. Whether you're a doctor, a teacher, a business leader, or simply someone navigating life's daily choices, the principle remains the same. Ethics matter, compassion matters, and standing up for what's right, even when you stand alone, can change lives. Now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in Dr. Emily Carter's situation? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between what's right and what's expected? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We value every perspective. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more eye-opening stories that inspire and challenge the way we see the world. Together, we can keep these important conversations alive and encourage more people to stand up for what's right.